So, there are many gaming emulation consoles on AliExpress. Some of them are good, some are bad, many of them are complete garbage. And with that being said, today I will be looking at this R36S emulation gaming console that I was able to get on AliExpress for approximately 26 euros. And let's start by looking at this box. Well, on a side we can see that I have a sticker over here that says 64G. That's because I have this like 64 GB version of this console. On the front there isn't much like technical information. Yeah, we have the resolution of the screen, which is 640 by 480. Other than that, gamepad, major chip, TF card means nothing. However, on the back we have a little bit more specification of what we have in this console. First of all, it's quad-core CPU with like 1.5 gigahertz. Then we have 1 GB of DDR3 RAM, IPS display. It says that it has like Bluetooth connection, and I guess that's supposed to be Wi-Fi, but we will come back to that later. And yeah, finally it lists some like emulators that it can play, and in the end it says that it has lithium polymer 3200 mAh battery in it that will last for approximately 6 hours, and I can confirm that that is true. So, if we open up the box, inside we have, this plastic case with some like really small instructions. Let's call this a manual. It describes some like key combination shortcuts, but again we will talk about that in a bit. And finally we have this charging cable, and we have some wipes for the screen, and also they have included this screen protector. And also there was this thing that was protecting our console, but as you can see there is no console inside this box because I have been testing it for actually a few months now, and I was really thinking about like what to say about it and what is my opinion. And yes, it's not that straightforward to explain. But now let's take a look at the console itself. Like, first of all, we have many buttons here at the front. We have the X, Y, A, B buttons that are actually standing out a little bit, but they feel kind of nice. I don't have any complaints about them. We also have a D-pad, and once again, it is not terrible. You can clearly feel when it's like registering like the push. And in my opinion it works actually pretty good. We also have the function button here in the middle, and there are select and start buttons next to it. We also have two joysticks over here that you can also press in, acting like R3 and L3 buttons, and the joysticks themselves also feel rather good. They are low profile, but I mean they do the job. At the back we have L1, L2, R1, R2 buttons, and on the side we have the volume control, we have the slot for the additional SD card. On the other side we have the power reset buttons, also another slot for the card, and here at the bottom there are two Type-C ports, one for charging and another one for like data, and also a mini jack, and that's a feature these days. Ooh. So let's turn this thing on and I will tell you about the experience. I adjusted the camera so that the screen looks almost like it looks in real life, and it is actually a pretty nice screen. It has like a nice viewing angles to it in real life. The colors are good and it is really crisp and it feels like a very good screen. So, but I want to talk a little more about the experience that I had when I was first starting this console. For me, it wasn't like straight out of the box, like ready console, because I had a few issues with it. First of all, the controls. I mean, for the most of these emulators, the controls were fine. I didn't have any problems with like the arcade emulation, Atari, all the like 8-bit or 16-bit consoles were like absolutely fine. However, when it comes to something like PlayStation and PSP, I did have some issues. So my first real problem was that none of the like shortcuts described in the manual actually worked for me. So once I noticed the problem with controls, I actually went into the settings of the console itself, and I was trying to remap the buttons in like the control settings, and after I did that, I actually was able to use the function button and access more stuff within the game emulations themselves. So yeah, that was the first thing I needed to do to get this thing working properly. And obviously, if we look through the settings, you can see that there are a lot of things you can do with this thing. I'm not gonna go into like each and every like setting over here, but I mean there is a lot. You can even like overclock this thing and do stuff like that. But also there are these network settings that I wasn't able to like get working for my console. I don't know whether like it doesn't have like a Wi-Fi adapter in it and it just have settings for that, but I mean I wasn't able to get this thing working like within my Wi-Fi. But that being said, that's no problem for me because I don't know what for I would even go online with this thing anyways. So yes, as I mentioned, like all the like older stuff on this console definitely works. For example, if I want to play like Super Famicom, Nintendo, or even take my Sonic the Hedgehog on a go and play it on this console, I can easily do that. But obviously this console is supposed to be more powerful than that, and for example, it should be able to play Nintendo 64 games. And I mean, this console was shipped to me like with a ton of preloaded ROMs in it, and many of them are N64 games. So, for example, if I want to play my Mario games, I would be looking at this N64 emulation, and yeah, I would be actually disappointed because I find that the N64 emulation on this thing is actually really glitchy. As an example, I will show you the Super Smash Brothers, and I mean, the emulation for this thing is terrible. I mean, yeah, it is trying and it is technically like launching the game, but as you can see, every texture is just glitching out, even like in this like first movie over here. And it crashed. And I mean, even if we would get like to the gameplay, it would be horrible because half of the textures wouldn't load properly, and I was able to get to the gameplay beforehand. But yeah, that brings us to the point that if you are looking forward to this console just to play N64, like, this is not the way to do that. And luckily for us, we have the reset button. So it does reset the game for us. Next thing I wanted to point out was PlayStation emulation, and yeah, for the most part it works well. So if I want to play my Tekken 3 on a go, well, probably I could use this console. However, my only problem with PlayStation emulation was the fact that at first I wasn't able to get like the R2 and L2 buttons to work. However, as you can see by loading up like Tekken 3, it does work much better than the N64 did, and yeah, everything is just okay. This is like a movie, it's pre-rendered, but still it works great. and like if we play if we start the game, like the options and everything just works. But yes, getting back to the issue with the buttons, first of all, as I said, I remapped the buttons outside of the emulation. However, after I did that, I was actually able to access each and every emulation separately by pressing function and X. And yeah, I was able to actually remap the buttons within the emulation software itself, and then I was able to actually play the games as intended, and all the buttons were actually working. And just to show you that everything works now, I will actually choose like an arcade mode and let's play as Yoshimitsu. And as you can see, the loadings are fine, like they are actually quite fast. And yeah, everything now just works. You can just absolutely play the game and yeah, have fun on the go. As you can see, the triggers also work. Yeah, and everything is just great. However, at the same time, I must comment that the shape of the console, I don't find it to be very ergonomic, at least for my hands. I mean, it is fine when you are using like the face buttons and like the L1 and R1. However, it is kind of hard to reach and precisely press on like R2 and L2 buttons. And yeah, I just find it uncomfortable. I much rather like prefer consoles that are a little bit larger where I can keep my arms a little bit farther away from each other. Next console I want to talk about is PSP. Because this once again was one of those consoles that needed a little bit of tweaking around. And once again, the tweaking that needed to be done was the remapping of the controls within the emulation. So let me explain by showing you the original PSP, and the problem that I had was that the buttons were actually mapped incorrectly when it came to like triangle and square, which were like switched in places, and the same was done with like circle and X, which again were like just switched around. And once again, this was one of those emulations that I was actually able to like really like get into and compare against the original. For example, playing Tekken Dark Resurrection. And yeah, I found that the emulation actually runs quite well. I do have a little bit of stutter like now and there. However, overall experience is definitely worth it if you don't have access to the original PSP. However, if you do have an access to original PSP, yeah, I would rather prefer playing games on this thing just because it feels better when I hold it in my hands. As I mentioned before, I like when my hands aren't that close together, and also the screen is larger on the PSP. However, yes, this works, and it works actually pretty good. And as you can see, the emulation that it is running for PSP is PPSSPP. Next, let's talk about the Nintendo DS. Well, technically, the emulation for the DS works. However, there is one problem. If you just take a look at the DS Lite over here, you can clearly see that this has two displays, and one of them is actually a touch screen. And for this console, we have only one screen that is approximately the same size as the upper screen of DS Lite, and it is not a touch screen. So basically, you are very limited in which games you can actually play on this device. And for example, like even when you launch a game, whatever, you will see that, yeah, the screen itself, giving the fact that it's like placing two screens on top of one another, yeah, the screen looks really small. Technically, this still works, but me personally, I wouldn't play DS games on this device. And I mean, finally, I want to talk about the Dreamcast. Like, Dreamcast, once again, is one of those a little bit more demanding things on this device. And yeah, for me, it's kind of like on the edge over there. Like the games work, like there's no problem with that. However, I find them to look a little ugly. I mean, wherever we're gonna see like any like text within the game, yeah, it's kind of hard to read. I think there's some like imprecision when it comes to like pixels being shown like on this display. For example, here this text just feels like glitchy. It's all over the place. Like the large letters, okay, they are fine, but like the small text, you can't really like read those. However, at the same time, like yes, this thing works. I mean, you can play the games if you want to, but I mean that the experience, in my opinion, is far from being like the optimal way to experience any like Dreamcast games. But man, yeah, as you can see, we are driving the taxi and yeah, it works. And I mean, finally, just to compare the size of this thing, you can see that it is approximately the same size as the Game Boy Color. Yeah, it's actually really close. So, as I said, I have been thinking about this console and testing it for quite some time now, and yeah, it was really hard to make this review because I actually don't know where I land with this thing. In my opinion, it does a really good job when it comes to like all the like 8-bit, 16-bit stuff, like in Game Boy Color games, Game Boy Advance games, like NES, SNES, Famicom, like Sega Mega Drive and stuff like that works excellent on this thing. On the other hand, like for example N64 doesn't work in my opinion. You shouldn't buy this thing if you're looking towards like N64 emulation. And that kind of like takes me to the like point where honestly this device is probably for people who are more like enthusiastic about gaming, who like tweaking around stuff, like who wants to explore all the like settings and see how you can like overclock this thing and maybe like put something else on this device. Because for a person who's like looking at like straight out of the box experience, this console, in my opinion, kind of like is not delivering. Don't get me wrong, it is a nice thing, and for me personally, I see value in this thing for playing like homebrew stuff. Actually loading up a homebrew games for like Game Boy Advance, because there's like a very like large community of people actually making games up to this day for that system, and that same goes for PS1. Because I like having dedicated hardware, and as such this is pretty good. However, for more casual people, I think you would be much better off by just taking any like modern smartphone and just pairing it with a physical controller and adding the same emulation software on your phone. So yes, to conclude, I think this is a nice thing, but it is also a very niche thing for people who actually wanna like tinker around with it. But at the same time, it is relatively cheap. I mean, if you compare this thing to the like Ambernick or something, like it is like 1/3, 1/4 of the price of those emulation consoles. And it actually does almost everything it says on the box, if you are willing to go into the settings and like mess around a little bit. To sum up everything, I will just say the console is good, but it is definitely not for everyone. And with that being said, I want to say a huge thank you for joining me today and watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, drop a comment. What is your experience with buying like some of these like weird gaming emulation consoles online? And if you want to see more content like this, where I look at weird stuff I find on the internet, maybe subscribe to my channel. Huge thank you for joining one more time, and I hope to see you guys next time. Goodbye Bye 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 bye. Goodbye goodbye goodbye.